Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 23rd West Fargo City Commission meeting. I call the meeting to order, and I respectfully request that you join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Hagemeister, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jorgensen? Here. Commissioner Sundell? Here. Commissioner Dardis?
Here.
Commissioner Olson? Here. Commissioner Anderson?
The record show all commissioners are present. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it is in front of you and it has been distributed in your packets. Thank you, Commissioner Jorgensen. Is there a second, please? Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Testing.
Work? No.
Oh,
Oh, there I am.
testing.
Hello.
Okay.
All right.
Hello.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next order of business is a consent agenda. We have items A through D. They are. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Zundell, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, items A through D as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, we are now on the regular agenda. First order of business is the review of the 2025 final budget. Mr. Dustin Scott, City Administrator of the City of West Fargo. Purpose of this discussion is to discuss the 2025 city budget. Mr. Scott, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Pleased to bring forward a draft of the final budget, but before I jump into that, with your permission, I'd like to make a quick introduction.
Please do.
Introducing to you our new Finance Director, Willie, all the way from California.
I have no last name, so it's just Willie. Thank you, everyone.
Galindo, sorry.
Willie Galindo, happy to be here. Came from a little small town, California, Los Angeles County. Worked in a city called Palmdale for 7 years there, 7+. And I hope that my experience and all the knowledge that I'm taking from there will help the city grow and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to West Fargo.
We were fortunate to have Willie come a few days early last week and join us at the League of Cities Conference in Grand Forks. So he's already making some connections and developing a network, so we're happy to have him on board. Okay, with that, I will start walking through the draft of our final budget here. Looking at the timeline first, tonight's meeting is to just have a review of the final budget. Following tonight, we will take any last feedback, comments, and incorporate any of your wishes as we work towards the final budget meeting on October 7th.
Before you go on, we're getting feedback or something going on here.
It'll shut off eventually. It
Okay.
starts up and then shuts down.
Okay.
Usually it does it at like 4 o'clock, so you don't know.
Is it just the fan that you can hear?
No, that wasn't the fan. It was microphone feedback, like a hum.
Yeah, it's a little hot.
I will start again and just let me know if it is still got feedback. I can kind of hear it myself, actually.
There's an echo.
Yeah.
Okay. you want to give a
We
couple
don't
minutes?
know if it affects the recording or not, so.
I don't know. We'll give Emily a minute or two here and see what she comes up with. Okay, so the fan stopped, but do you still hear the echo?
We have,
We are not doing this on purpose.
Is it better now?
Is that better?
Please proceed.
All right, so October 7th, we need to approve the final budget so that we can return it to the county prior to October 10th. Okay. Next couple slides here, an overview on the updates since our preliminary budget was approved. Where we are currently standing is a 0 mil increase. So this removes the 2 mills that were approved in the preliminary budget for the general and fire fund. It also removes the 0.8 mil levy that was proposed for the library. Department heads worked with their staff and came up with a total of $567,000 worth of expenditure line item reductions. This next one, $608,000 in capital for the right-of-way and street lighting departments. There were 2 items that were mistakenly removed prior to approving the preliminary budget. They were in the meeting, or in the budget when we met on July 29th. We specifically talked about those items being funded with economic development sales tax. However, they were mistakenly removed out of the budget. And so we are.
So you say that the revenue was still there, but the expenses were removed?
Correct,
Thank you.
yes. So we did move those expenses back in. Cass County did send updated assessed values. The change resulted in about $1,000 of an increase, so the value of 1 mil is now equivalent to about $272,000, up from $271,000. We are proposing an additional $215,000 of use out of the economic development sales tax to fund things like equipment and maintenance operations for our economic developed areas. For example, our downtown areas, the lights area, those particular places that were developed using economic development sales tax dollars. We do have updated insurance rates. We have been making those adjustments into our budget. Our HR director, Sarah Gosovich, did tell me there are still some minor updates to make here and there, but all of that will be in and final prior to bringing the final budget forward on October 7th. We're proposing to increase our use of public safety sales tax by approximately $1.5 million. That would bring the total projected transfer up to just shy of 4.9 million. When looking at the projected end of year balance for 24, plus the revenues we're projecting for 25, we are forecasting up over $6 million. And so when you compare the transfer that we're proposing in 25 versus what we are projecting to be a balance, we will still have a positive cash balance at the end of 25. I'm gonna guess it's roughly around $1 million, but that number is fluid and will depend on, of course, things like the 2024 audit when we get to that particular point. So the use of the public safety sales tax to cover operations, which at the foundational level of that tax is the intent, and that is how we are balancing our general and fire fund budget. And we currently still have a COLA of 4%. In reducing the mills down to zero, a 0 mil increase, that does leave a shortfall in the library fund, and that we will get to that later on here in the presentation. So, this slide here is just demonstrating by department the changes to the expenditures from the preliminary budgets where we are at today. Off to the right, you can see there were significant deductions in travel and education, technology, vehicles, salaries, and building repairs. More specifically, here are the itemized reductions that our department heads were able to come up with. So leaving us now with total expenditures, the general fire fund, just over $40 million. Airport, $185,000. Library, over $2.6 million. General fund reserves, there's $1.3 million there of expenditures coming out of the general fund reserves account. And then our utility funds totaling about $26 million. So all in all, we've got expenditures just over 69 million, or just over 70 million. After the preliminary budget was approved, I did get some questions from commissioners regarding how we calculate our staffing costs. So the next couple slides are just a brief overview of how we go about calculating not only the salaries and how we incorporate COLA. Really, our staffing costs are derived from a grade and step structure. That structure was adopted back in November of 2018. The city has historically used a grade and step system, which is very common amongst government agencies. But in 2018, the commission approved a structure that reduced the number of grades and steps. So we currently now have 26 grades and 11 steps. Each position receives a grade. This is based on evaluation and meeting certain metrics, criteria. This evaluation is often done by a third party. And then for each grade, there is a pay range. And that pay range is spread over the 11 steps. And like I said, this is a very common system for government employment. We did have a recent salary study done. And if you recall, that was really a survey using data that was pulled from the City of Fargo salary study from a few years ago, as well as looking at other published sources. And that really was just a look at the market appropriateness of salary ranges as of January 24. So that didn't look into the future. It was really looking backwards and getting us into an appropriate marketability for our positions as of 2024. So calculating for the budget, we generate our staffing list of including grades and steps, new positions, existing positions, all of that is pulled together. We apply a COLA to the current year's salary schedule, and a step is given to those eligible employees. Then we look at calculating costs like FICA, pension, WSI, et cetera, and add that to the total salary projections. Our health benefits are based on provider quotes, and of course those vary depending on the plan elections that staff choose. And one of the more common questions I've received from commissioners has been, when it comes to the steps, what is that percent change? This table here shows for every grade what that percent change is for a step. And as you can see, going from A to B, and then from B to C, C to D, so on and so forth, the percent change of a step or the value of a step is decreasing as we move through the step scale. Some here are as low as 2.4%, 2.3%, and some are as high as 5%. And by design, the structure was set up so that within the first couple of years, your increases are a little higher. That, yes.
It's like you saw the furrow in my brow and knew it was coming. So I guess, do we have any numbers put together offhand at all of how long our average employee is staying in the city of West Fargo? Like, how long is the average employee with us? Or do we have any drop-off points in years of employment? And the only reason I ask is I personally dislike the fact that the longer you're here, the less your step increases. I almost feel like, and then again, if they reach the end, we're almost penalizing them because then they're solely dependent on the cost of living. So I think I'm seeking to understand a little bit more why it's inverted this way and if it has anything to do with when employees typically fall off.
Well, I was not here when this particular system was passed in November of 18. I will say that I know there were many more steps before that.
Yep.
But the value of the step was lesser.
I believe there were 37.
Sure, yep, and I became a city employee that particular month, so I guess I haven't known anything else other than the 11 steps, but one of the courses that were offered at the League of Cities conference last week was specifically regarding compensation and the grade and step programs. This is very common practice. Why only 11? I think that's where the commission can have that reevaluated. There are other ways to administrate this and manage it. For each position, there is a developed salary range, a low end and a maximum end. And so really what the step is doing is trying to keep a progression towards that maximum salary, and it's really up to the commission as to if you want 34 steps or 11 steps. An employee will hit that maximum threshold sooner. If I had we could certainly do some more homework as to why this particular system was put before the commission back in 18. I don't have those specifics. But again, truncating it down to only 11 allows us to have an employee reach their maximum potential sooner. Whereas in the past, maybe after year 5 or 10, employees were seeking other jobs because they could make more money, whereas this tries to keep them in the market.
For longer.
If you will.
Excuse me, when I said, I didn't mean steps, there were I believe there were 37 grades, not steps.
Yeah, I think there were 20-some steps, but I can't say for sure.
Is it customary for them to decrease in percentage over time as well? Is that a standard? I see. Joshevich is saying yes. Okay, so it's customary for it to go, so the spread is either that 30, 40, 50%, the changes decrease over time through the different steps, and that's standard across industries. Okay. Thank you.
Please, Commissioner Anderson. Go ahead.
I don't think it's a percentage. The percentage is decreasing only because the value is going higher, right? So if you look at it, like I'm just doing some quick math here at $100,000 and starting in the middle and looking at, let's say, F to G, and then going up to G to H, that increase, it's roughly a $3,850 increase each step of the way. So that's why the percentage decreases.
Yep, same
It's the
dollar
same
amount.
dollar amount.
Yep.
So it doesn't really decrease.
Commissioner Olson also had a point to make.
And keep in mind that, you asked the question, how long do we have people work for the city and all that kinds of stuff? And I don't know if we've got an exact number on that off the top of our heads, but you have people who start out at a lower graded position and then move up. So to say that one person's going to get hired at grade 8 and stay in grade 8 for the entire tenure it isn't very common. Hopefully, we provide an environment where people can move up within their department and progress. So then the clock starts over again. Once you get a promotion, then you go back. You jump to a higher paid grade, but you may drop back in steps. So then you start all over again. So it may take a long time for somebody to max out. So that was just my comment on that one.
Yeah, one thing with the city, we deal with a vast number of industries, if you will. I mean, we've got service areas, anything from, out mowing our boulevards to policing our streets to designing our facilities. And so I'll say that it varies depending on department from department and position to position. I will say that one thing I learned last week is some cities have different structures for different departments. For example, their public safety sector will be in a slightly different, still grade and step system, but there'll be differences versus their administrative departments. So again, these are things that we can consider as we move forward, but our HR director has been doing a lot of homework and digging into these things, looking at our adjustments from year to year and comparing to other cities in North Dakota. Again, I'm very confident that we aren't exceeding the norm, if you will. In fact, some of her work has suggested that we are underperforming compared to other cities. And when I say underperforming, in terms of pay adjustments year to year, looking back as far as 2019. So again, just wanted to, for one, publicly answer the question on what are our steps doing, and two, make it well aware that this is a very common pay system within government agencies. Three, we aren't doing anything beyond other big cities in North Dakota. In fact, from Sarah's research, we are lagging in those pay adjustments, at least over the last 5-6 years. Okay, moving on to COLA. Got a couple slides on COLA here. Starting out with with the preliminary budget, I had a little historical table showing our COLA over the last several years. I do want to point out there was one big error in that table for the year of 2022. In 2022, or I should say in 21, approving the 22 budget, they approved the budget at a 1% COLA, which is what I previously had indicated in the table. However, Nick had done a little bit of homework and saw that in November of 21, there was an agenda item brought forward where the commission approved an amendment to the budget to allow for a 4% COLA. Again, between Sarah doing all of her homework and putting numbers together, she found things weren't quite jiving. Nick went back and dug that up and did find that there was a budget amendment made approving a 4% COLA. So this table looks a little different when you look at the last few years being at 4% versus just the last 2 years. So I do want to point that out. We also thought it'd be good to throw a comparison down to Social Security. And as you can see, tracking back to 2018, our COLA in comparison with those adjustments made for Social Security, we are behind that by 7%, give or take. So again, just comparative data. Any questions on that particular table? Below that, then, we are showing what a COLA looks like at 2%, 3%, 4%. And like I mentioned earlier, we still have a 4% COLA reflected in this budget. Additional detail that was requested by commissioners, breaking out our COLA by fund and then by department. As you can see, the table to the left, our general and fire fund, the difference between the value of 1% of COLA is about $244,000. For library, it's closer to 16,000. Utility funds, about 45,000, for a total of about $306,000 for a single percent shift of COLA. Any questions on the COLA?
Commissioner Zundell has a question.
Can you remind me what we have a mill valued at right now?
72.
272,000.
272. Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions on COLA, good. I'll head into the revenues. So you can see here, we did remove the increases we had in the mill levy. So we are at a 0 increase. That's not to say that we aren't still receiving more revenue based on increased valuations, but we are not proposing to increase the mill levy itself. This table here, just for a median sale value of $339,900, that equates to a property tax of about $1,219.99. Correct. Yes, thank you for that clarification. That is just for the city. And that's, you can see that there, the 79 mills levied only city. This is the same slide that I had in the preliminary budget. I'll skip through it. I think you're all familiar with the property tax reform. So our total revenues for the general and fire fund, just over $40 million. 18 million of that is generated from the property taxes. This slide is showing our transfers. So when we talk about using additional sales tax dollars, for example, we are tracking that, itemizing it, and that detail is provided on this slide, as well as on in our budget book, which I should mention, Rachel did get published our budget book on our website, so that is available for the public to view. Of course, that'll be updated after we receive any final changes after tonight's meeting. So really, last slide, just showing our change in our net position. So as I mentioned, we were balancing our general fire fund with an increase of use of our public safety sales tax. We have a surplus in our airport funds and our utility funds. However, as I mentioned early on, removing that 0.8 mil increase for the library does put them in a deficit. So that is something that we will need to address. I'd certainly welcome feedback as we move forward for the October 7th meeting. Some options there include using reserves, looking for additional expenditures. I'm not sure that's overly possible given the conversations I've had with the library director, or adding that 0.8 mil increase back in. So again, some options to consider.
Can I ask a question?
Commissioner Zundell has a question again.
Could you go over maybe the benefits of if we had the 0.8 library mill in the event that Measure 4 passes? Is there a benefit to having the 0.8 mil increase instead of covering it with reserves? As I feel like I feel like our library has been running pretty tight over a long amount of time. So are there things to consider in that regard?
Yes.
I'm just
absolutely.
concerned
Thank you for
about the
question.
bigger, longer term picture of that.
Yes. So the measure proposes to replace property tax revenue with state revenue, and it'll be set at the level of our current property tax revenue, really. So if we set a 0.8 mil increase for the library, that will increase their revenue for 25, and should the measure pass, that's the revenue that the state will provide them. If we do not give them the 0.8 mil increase and we fund it through reserves, we'll likely be looking at a perpetual spending out of reserves, or again, asking them to decrease their services is really about all they can do at this point.
Everybody clear on that? Okay.
And that same concept goes for the city's budget too, their general fire fund. All of our levied funds will be, the revenue will come from the state in the amount that we set our levy for 2025.
Our 2025 projected property tax is $19,477,900, correct?
I thought it was closer to 8, yeah, but you have to subtract out the discount. So,
For prepaid, okay.
Yep.
Discount.
now I don't know how that relates to, I'm not sure how that would come into play with the measure if it passes.
There's been no discussion about it. It's
Right.
not in any of the language.
Right.
I asked some of the politicians last week at the League of Cities. Okay, very good, thank you.
So again, really tonight is just what direction do you have for staff? What changes can we make as we work on our final budget here for the October 7th meeting? Again, with where we're at today, general fire funds, that's balanced. Library is really where we have a deficit, so. Any last questions that I can help?
Questions for Mr. Scott?
One more. Remind me of the mill, what a mill was last year, or this year, I guess.
This year's 272.
That would be for next year, so what is this year's?
The mill value in 2024, I believe, was 252.
252?
Is that
That sound right, like?
256 maybe? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, Commissioners, this is a meeting on the preliminary budget, final draft, but we can take action tonight in various other ways. We can approve it tonight if this whole discussion, if you're, as commissioners, are comfortable with that. We can look into the line items. We can talk about very specific things, for example, the COLA or anything else that you choose to. So I'm gonna rely on your discretion and your lead as to how you'd like to proceed in this discussion. Commissioner Olson.
I just want to make a comment that for those of us that sat on this commission 2 years ago, we had in the 11th hour a proposal to cut some expenditures at the last minute of the time we could ever approve a budget, and was held hostage. So if there's any of us up here that have any interest in making suggestions to cut it, let's hear them tonight so we have time to be informed and make an informed decision on that rather than doing something like that.
Agree. Commissioner Zundell.
I'll give you my big picture after much thought, digestion, and number crunching. On September 11th, the CPI was rated at 2.5%. Cass County approved a 2.5%. I know Fargo right now is currently holding in at 4%. I believe Clay County and Moorhead were also coming in at 2.5%. So I would like to see our COLA, I would be in favor of a 2.5 for the people that have not maxed out their steps, and then the people that have maxed out their steps offering perhaps a slightly higher percentage, like 3% or something similar. I believe there were 11 employees when I asked HR about that. I think we should probably add the library mill back in just in lieu of everything and find a way, if we can, to take that off even on the city side, as far as a reduction of 0.8 mils on the city side, so we keep it somewhat even instead of pulling it out of reserves, is where I'm at.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
So the cost of living for me, if I'm maxed out, is still the same cost of living increases for you if you haven't maxed out. So why would we want to segregate that person and saying that just because you maxed out, you get more, even though the cost of, and you get less because, and the price of a gallon of milk is still the same for me and you. So that's what you gotta consider about the COLA, it's a cost of living. It isn't because we wanna make it up because you maxed out. So that's where I'm at on that. I would not want to do that.
You know, we've all gotten lots of input from the public on this issue, on this particular issue. And of course, it depends on some of the data that you're using. You know, the cost of living or the consumer price index is X. The Social Security adjustment for fixed income people is X. You know, so there's people, you know, and including us, when we look at that, you know, do we focus on the consumer price index? Do we focus on what the Social Security adjustment is, 2.7175, something like that this year? So that's, you know, that's all important data to give consideration to. Is there any issue, I see that our HR person had to leave, but is there any issue with making what Commissioner Zundel has suggested regarding a certain group of employees getting a certain percentage and another group getting another? Is there any issues with that?
Well, I think that
Legally, anything like that?
maybe my concern would be, and I'd certainly love to defer this to our HR director, but she did tell me that she had a connectivity to get to. You know, at first thought of it, I would say it's consistency. Will this be consistent year in, year out? So if we come up with a split now, are we gonna continue to do that in subsequent years as other people start to max out? So I think that's where it could get a little tricky. You know, if we're struggling with the fact that people do max out, we might want to take a step back and look at our salary structure.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Dustin. You know, I see the Honorable former State Senator Seymour is in the back of the room there, and that's what they call legislative intent at the legislature, is that the fact that we intended that to happen, some of us might not be here next election cycle, so that might, you know, fall by the wayside. So legislative intent is always a difficult thing to deal with, as to trying to forecast what the expenditures might be for future generations of our commission. So that's a tough one. Commissioner Zundel, you have another point?
I do know City of Fargo does like a longevity pay scale,
They do.
where based on years of service, they get like a yearly stipend where I think they have it chunked out every 5 years. So not going to call it a bonus, but they have like a longevity payout. So that might be another option. It looks like there are 15 people currently maxed out, and of those 15, 5 of those people have been there maxed out at their current position the entire time that we've moved to step and grade. Just as an update.
Just a point of clarification, we've been at step and grade. We didn't move to step and grade. We just moved to a,
Right, of what they entered in. So as far as like years at step K, there are 5 employees that have been at step K since we moved to step and grade in 2018.
right, yeah. And there was a step and grade before 2018. It was just,
Whatever the,
yeah, they were 20
like the
something.
modified.
Yep, it was the
Yep.
modified grade step.
So there have been people basically at their highest step. There's been 5 of them, just for numbers' sake, just.
Yep, yep. And believe me, I'd love to recognize, you know, looking at longevity pay, rewarding those that are loyal and stay here. I wish there were, yeah, we certainly can. We can look at Fargo's longevity pay system. I believe it's a monthly stipend that they get, and that scale increases.
Their longevity pay is paid monthly, yes, that's correct. In a previous life, I had a longevity pay for our employees as well.
Sure. Talking to their administrator last week, they are still at 4.5% COLA, I believe. Just throw that out there. But they've also made a lot of other changes, so it's difficult to compare city to city. It really is. And of course, for our staff, I want the best for them, and stand here and ask you again for a 4%. But again, any questions I can answer.
Mr. Jorgensen?
In looking at the list that Sarah was so fine to share with us, you know, I applaud the police department. 12 of the 15 people are from the police department. I don't believe there's enough opportunity to move up to get that next scale. So it's, I mean, like the street, you can start here, and there's plenty of opportunities to keep moving up scales where I think there's, what, 4 or 5 levels maybe? Chief could answer that, I don't know. But it's, you know, you look at the years of service, 18, 13, 13, 15, 13, 14. So, I mean, they're retaining on the police department, which is great. So I think that was the biggest one there is how do we find room in that division?
In evaluating those salaries, to Commissioner Jorgensen and Commissioner Zundel's point, when you have that it takes place, all of a sudden, these officers, or if in that case, that we're using the police department because there's a higher number of them there. These continue to move up to this level. Well, this person here is supervising the entire department, and that's what's known as payroll compression, is that these people here are going to hit a kind of a ceiling, whereas your chief of police or your deputy chief of police, there's no further. So these continue to close that gap. Commissioner Olson.
I hate to keep bringing it up, but I worked for the government for 36 years. And there are limits to where you can get in a particular office. And the only way to get a higher grade was to move to a different entire division. You had to move either to Kansas City or to Washington, D.C. to get that higher grade. I had always considered to do that in my final 3 years to get my high 3 is to move to Washington, D.C. because I maxed out at the highest grade I could get here. So it's great that we have them, and I did it for 36 years. So as a city employee, any government employee, you know that there are limitations to your grade and step. So, you know, and I applaud them all for being here that long. But we have to also consider that that is a choice that they make to stay here too. If they wanted to apply for a higher position within the department, they sure can. And if they're the best qualified, let's move them up the ladder. But some of them I've talked with are just fine and dandy where they're at. They don't want to move up. They're comfortable where they're at. And so you have to consider that too, that there are people who just don't want to make a change because they're happy in that position. So you got to think of all of those things too. It isn't just that we're holding them back.
Right. No, I completely agree
Sometimes
with
they
you.
hold
I completely
themselves
agree with
back because they're comfortable.
Commissioner Anderson.
Thinking about the segregation between those that have maxed out on the steps and those that haven't, you know, I've thought about that. I'm a little on the fence with that, but one segregation that I've put a lot of thought, or at least thought more about, was our own salaries as commissioners. Are we able to separate ours and say, hey, you know what, instead of looking at others, maybe we don't need to give ourselves a raise? You know, I don't know, this is a question, I guess when I was on the Special Assessment Commission, you know, you get a fee or a little paycheck for each district that was assessed out. I was only there for a couple of years, but I don't recall seeing any kind of an increase. Does anybody on the commissions that get paid, do they get a increase as well with these COLAs, or is that just a straight fee that, you know, that they're paid out?
Yes, I can say specifically for example, the Special Assessment Commission, that was adjusted not too long ago, probably either right after you got off or right before you got on. And that is kind of like our other fees, that is set by resolution of the commission as like a fee. Whereas commissioner salaries are set by ordinance, and where this was in 2014 or 2015, I believe that ordinance was put in place. It identified the commissioner salaries and specifically said that they will increase by COLA each year. So we could certainly amend that ordinance, but technically if you don't give yourself the COLA, you're in violation of an ordinance. Sorry.
We don't have time to change an ordinance between now and October 7th.
Okay.
You can certainly approve a budget
We can
without.
approve it with the intent.
Yes, so yeah, you can approve the budget with the dollars reduced, but we would certainly want to amend the ordinance to reflect it.
And I mean,
We would save
level set, it would,
$1,500
yeah, it wouldn't
in
be
the
much.
fiscal year
It wouldn't,
if we
it
did
wouldn't
that.
be much that we would save, but if we're talking about other
Yep.
salaries and stuff, yeah, Nicola, we're lumped in, but we should be, I don't do this for the money, so it's like, I want to throw out that
I-
as an option as well.
And I'm fine without splitting. It just was a thought I had, and I know we have some changes probably up and coming to what we're doing next year as far as looking at performance or doing whatever. I just think it's a conversation to keep in mind. So I'm totally comfortable doing just one COLA. How does everyone feel about the percentage? Because that's obviously going to be something we have to agree on.
What was the percentage?
I threw out 2.5.
I would go 3.
Okay. Any other discussion on that?
I feel better about the 2.5, but
Are we going to meet in the
Personally,
middle and
I'd
2.75?
struggle.
You know,
Well, I
I'd rather see 2 or
all
lower.
of this discussion is extremely pertinent when we're starting
Yep.
to talk about the steps and the grades and all of that. But there was also a conscious effort made by community leaders way before all of us when it came to the pension and maxing out that pension contribution. And, there's school districts that have done that same very thing in the region, and there's cities that have done that. So, there's each time you go through this process, one has to take a look at all of the different types of levels of compensation that have been considered previously to where we're at today. And I think that that's important. That's, I would guess that the 16% pension contribution, which is maximum, complete, is a positive deal, for employees, particularly if I was just starting out in a new career. That's one of the things that you have to add in. So there's a lot of factors that obviously all of us have been reviewing and considering, as well as the public whispering in our ear. So I've heard 2.5, I've heard 3, and heard another 2.5. We can continue to discuss this, or I'd entertain a motion.
Where are you at, Rory?
Guess I really don't, just trying to run some numbers here.
Are there any other, we've been focused thus far on this part of the conversation with COLA. Are there other line items? Commissioner Zundell also mentioned the library and that .8.
Well, how are we going to pay for that? How would that be covered, that deficit?
I would say with COLA. I mean, well, if we reduce,
That would
if
get
we went
us-
down to a 2.5 for COLA, we could, in theory, go down 1.68 mils. That would be no, math is wrong on that?
No, because when we look at these, what's being levied is only out of the general fire fund and the
That was there.
and
in my math.
library fund. So utilities is all done through the utility fees and it's not levied. So that doesn't affect the mills.
So if we went down, do you have those numbers,
if we-
Justin, by chance? If we went down to,
It's only 187,000. We could take that out of reserves and cover it.
for the library, you mean?
Yes.
So you don't want to keep the mill?
That would be ongoing.
That's the problem.
Couldn't be faced with that again next year.
So if we take this roughly,
That's the issue.
Out of $70 million?
I understand, but
know,
we're
I know.
going to have this repeated
yep.
conversation for generations.
if we
I don't have a problem with that.
Right,
Again,
right, yep.
I'm just making a point.
If we take this 260,000 roughly for the general fire and library per 1%, and if we go down to 2.5, I'm taking the 260 times 1.5, taking that as a subtraction, we'd be down 390, which is, yeah, I guess it is a little over a mil. So,
Yep.
sorry, my math is a little off for here, but that's what happens when I multitask. But
It's all right. Yes, I got one, well, I included, so I got 1.68 when I did it at 2.5.
Well, the library could always ask for a mill
1.43.
Nope.
increase, right?
I took what the percentage.
So it isn't-
Yes, they could.
It isn't a
So I did a change in a single percentage shift times 1.5
done deal.
to go
They
down from
always wanna
4.
ask the residents for a mill
They're
increase.
1.4.
Not if Measure 4 passes. They won't be able to ask for a mill increase next year if the Measure 4 passes.
Right, I understand that.
So, so if this is about 1.4 mils, so what your number is
Yep.
1.6, whatever, we reduce those salaries, that would obviously have an impact on the library fund as well, but we could still see a reduction in total mills if we don't change
Correct.
anything else.
Correct.
And
If we
bring back
just
that
made those
If we bring
switches-
back that 0.8.
Yep.
All great discussion, but it's all math. The fact of the matter is we, the adjustment for the COLA is for the employees. And to try and maintain the level of services, we all know about what the workforce issues are across America, certainly across North Dakota and across Cass County. So it's all part of the overall big discussion. But I believe the COLA discussion should be on its own. Where do we feel that
Where are you at with it?
I'm fine with 2.5 or 3%? I do believe that all things considered, with all the research that we've done, that the 4% is probably not in the this time around.
I'm more comfortable at 3.
Okay. Well, again, we can continue to have additional discussion on line items. Thus far, the library has come up and the COLA has come up.
I make a motion.
I'm going to follow your lead, Commissioners.
I make a motion to reinstitute the 0.8 mil for the library.
Commissioner Zundel has moved to increase a 0.8 mil increase for the library.
I'll just put it back to what they had recommended, I guess.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. It has been moved and seconded to reinstate a 0.8 mil to the library mill levy.
Just for clarifications,
Please.
we had that.
We
in-
had it
in
originally,
the- So,
and that would have been in the preliminary budget,
right, so basically you're saying we're just gonna leave it there?
Yep.
Rather than,
as opposed to try and take it out of reserves.
okay. Just for clarification,
Yes.
we're not adding a mill levy after we,
No,
that's what,
thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have addressed the library. Is there anything else that we want to discuss?
I'd make a motion to have a COLA of at least 3%.
Commissioner Olson moves for a 3% COLA increase for the employees. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. Been moved and seconded that the COLA increase for West Fargo employees is at 3% for the 2025 budget. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor of the 3% COLA signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails on a 3-2 vote.
I make a motion for a 2.5% COLA.
Is there a second, please? Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to have a 2.5% increase COLA for the city employees for the 2025 budget. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries, a 4-1 vote.
I make a motion to calculate whatever the reduction in our final mill levy would be based on the difference between what we just removed for COLA. So we can, hopefully, I guess my intent would be, I would like our general mills to come down from baseline by 0.8, so there's a no net increase in mills.
Mr. Scott, you have a question? You look like you're trying to follow the thought process of Commissioner.
It's late in the day. I've been up for a very long time. Basically, I would like to see a no net increase from the taxpayer. So if we are going to keep 0.8 mills in for the library, I would like our city mill to come down by 0.8, and that should net that out for the taxpayer. Would that be correct? Am I
I
calculating
think
that
with what
incorrect?
we just did
What
with
we
the
just did
COLA,
with
should
COLA,
be
yeah.
going, we should be reducing more than that 0.8.
Right.
Right. So I'm saying I would like at least a 0.8 reduction. I would like to see whatever the number is that we calculate, whether it's 1.4 or 1.68, whatever that number is, would be my motion to decrease our mill levy from what it is today.
We could do a motion, or
We've
that
already
is,
done
that's,
it.
that's kind
already
of a
done.
natural assumption that of what's
Already
going to
done.
transpire.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Because the budget,
Withdraw your motion.
the budget
I
presented,
withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner.
budget
Zundel.
presented to us
Okay.
was with a 4%. So
Yep.
we cut it by 1.5%, so that should,
Bring the total mill down. Okay.
but even by increasing the library by 0.8, it should come. Dustin's trying to do some quick math up there, I can tell.
I'm new here, you know?
So are there other?
Maybe this is something we need to wait until the next meeting, or,
We will certainly do the calculation, provide updated information to the commissioners, and yes, by your math, I think you're on the right track. The reduction in the COLA should allow us to reduce the
Reduce.
general fire fund mill levy
Correct.
by at least 0.8.
Yep.
Now, yeah, that would be, the next question would be, do we want to take all of that savings off the mill levy, or is there some other option, not using as much public safety sales tax, for example, to cover some of the police fire operations? That's just an example.
In my opinion, the sales tax is there, and we should not treat it like a savings account on account of raising a mill levy or not lowering it as much,
Yes, absolutely.
is where my perspective is.
Thank you. Is there any other line items or anything specific on this final draft budget that any commissioner would like to discuss?
Is this, I know one of the things we talked about previously was moving fire into the general fund and not having separate funds. Is that something that would be an active motion to do today for the upcoming budget? Or is that a totally different?
Thank you for that question. I think it would be cleaner if there was a motion to do so.
I make a motion to move fire into our general fund.
Is there a second?
second.
And second by Commissioner Olson. Motion by Commissioner Zundel. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Are there any other items that would you like to?
I was just doing some quick math here, you know, the COLA, if Dustin has got it there, it's, each percentage is worth 305,000. So we reduced it by 305 plus another 152,000, so we reduced it, the total budget by 458,946. And the library is 187. So we've more than
We've got some
covered it.
movement.
Yes.
Yep.
Is there any other line item that you would like to discuss this evening?
I have one more.
Mr. Zundel?
I believe Mr. Scott is our only employee that is not currently in the STEP.
That is correct.
He is not. So my other question, and upon reviewing all of the things that we're doing, I would make a motion that he re-enters the STEP program at the closest grade and step to what he is at.
Is there a second? I second it. Been moved and seconded to move Mr. Scott back into the HR program for steps and grades.
Why? I just want to know why.
To me, it doesn't make any sense to exclude one employee. You know, we just got done talking about how segregation doesn't make sense for people. And so I think if that is the perspective, it doesn't make sense to me to have an employee that has been here be excluded from what we're doing.
I agree. That's why I seconded it. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson, I'm not sure of your vote.
Nay.
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 Okay? Motion fails. Is there any other line item? Now, we could move to approve this final draft this evening. I would caution us from that. And the reason I'd like to state that is that on our next meeting on October 7th is a regular scheduled meeting. We have public comment, we have all of those types of things. At this meeting, we do not have. So out of respect for the public, to have that one final purview and to have opportunity to address us, I would respectfully request that we not take final action on the budget this evening and defer to our next commission meeting.
Just a question on that.
Please.
Since we're not going to, basically, if we go through with what you just said, Mr. Mayor, everything we voted on tonight could be brought back and re-voted on and have another discussion on it on the 7th? I just want to know, or is it a done deal because those that voted in the affirmative could bring it back for further discussion? It's just what I'm asking for clarification.
They could.
Okay.
Robert's Rules of Order, anyone that votes in the affirmative or on the
Prevailing,
majority side,
yeah, prevailing.
they can absolutely do that.
So it's not a done deal yet.
Not a done deal that.
Even though we voted on various things, it could come back and we could just.
Again, it's to help Mr. Scott and his efforts of putting the final numbers in front of this so we can share it with the public to where we're at, as well as all of us commissioners to understand and to see the real numbers of what we've done. Are there any other line items that should be addressed in the budget?
I feel very comfortable with all of the line items, and I've read through them many, many times. Haven't seen anywhere else where I think things could necessarily come off. So I don't have any issues personally with any of the individual line items.
With that, there's no more additional comments from the commissioners, staff, department heads. Do you have any comments? Anything that you'd like to bring forward this evening? Commissioners? Commissioner Olson?
Move to adjourn.
Commissioner Zundell?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.